My parents always preached that family was everything, but when a surgeon told me I needed $10,000 to fix the agony tearing me apart, they suddenly pleaded poverty. I almost believed their lies, until my grandmother stepped in. She did not just write a check to save my life. She orchestrated a public reckoning that exposed their secrets and forced them to pay a price far higher than the money they refused me. The pain had been a silent roommate for 6 months, skulking in the corners of my life before it decided to move into the master bedroom and take over the lease. I had become an expert at negotiating with it. If I sat perfectly still in my ergonomic office chair, the sharp stabbing sensation in my lower abdomen would dull to a manageable throb. If I skipped lunch, I avoided the nausea that inevitably followed a meal. If I smiled tight enough during the Tuesday marketing strategy meetings, nobody at the firm would notice that my skin had turned the color of old parchment. It is just stress. I told myself, it is just the quarterly crunch. It is just being 33 and single in a city that demands hustle. I was working on the layout for a boutique hotel campaign, shifting layers in my design software. When the negotiation ended, the pain did not spike. It exploded. It felt as though someone had reached inside me with a hooked hand and twisted everything tight. My vision went white, then tunneled into a pinpoint of black. I remember the sound of my coffee mug hitting the carpet. It was a dull thud, not a shatter. I remember my supervisor, Dave, saying my name. But he sounded like he was speaking from the bottom of a swimming pool. Madeline? Then the floor rushed up to meet my cheek, cool and industrial and unforgiving. When I woke up, the lighting was different. It was the aggressive, humming fluorescent white of a medical facility. The smell was rubbing alcohol and floor wax. I was in urgent care, hooked up to a saline drip, with a doctor looking at a clipboard with the kind of expression people wear when they have to deliver bad news to a stranger. He did not waste time. He used words like masses and obstruction and urgent intervention. He told me I needed to see a specialist immediately. He told me that my strategy of ignoring my body had bought me a ticket to a surgical table. 2 days later, I sat in the office of Dr. Evans at St. Jude's Medical Center. The office was nice. It had plush chairs and artwork that was supposed to be soothing but just looked like blurry landscapes. Dr. Evans was kind, but he was also a mechanic looking at a totaled engine. "We need to operate. Madeline," he said, "we are looking at a partial resection. If we wait, the risk of rupture goes up significantly. I want to get you on the schedule for the week after next." I felt a wave of relief. Finally, a solution. I had insurance. I had a good job. I was a responsible adult. I nodded, ready to sign the consent forms. Then came the billing coordinator. Her name was Sheila, and she sat behind a desk that seemed designed to make me feel small. She tapped on her keyboard, her acrylic nails making a rhythmic clatter that sounded like hail on a tin roof. "Okay, Ms. Wood," she said, "your insurance has authorized the procedure. However, because this surgeon is out of network for your specific tier, and because you have not met your catastrophic deductible for the year, there is a gap." She printed a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. She circled a number at the bottom in red ink. $10,000. That is your preoperative deposit, she said. "We require this to be paid in full 48 hours prior to surgery to secure the operating room and the anesthesia team." I stared at the number. It looked like a phone number. It looked like a down payment on a car. It did not look like money I had in my checking account. "10,000? I asked, my voice sounding thin. "Can you bill me? I can set up a payment plan. I have a steady income." Sheila shook her head with practiced sympathy. "Policy changed last year," she said, "for elective or scheduled surgeries with this specific insurance gap. We require the deposit up front. Too many accounts went to collections. I can give you a list of medical credit cards we accept." I walked out of the hospital into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. I sat in my 10-year-old sedan and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I had $2,000 in savings. I had a credit card with a $3,000 limit that was already halfway full from car repairs. I was 5 days away from my next paycheck, which would barely cover my rent and the student loan payment that auto-drafted on the first of the month. I needed $10,000 in 10 days. I started with the logical steps. I went home, made a spreadsheet, and started calling. I called the hospital back to ask about charity care. I make too much money to qualify for charity care, the voice on the phone told me. I called my bank to ask for a personal loan. Your debt-to-income ratio is a little high right now, the loan officer said, and with your recent employment history showing a dip in income last year, we would need a cosigner. I sat in my apartment, which was really just a glorified studio with a curtain dividing the bed from the stove, and looked at my options. I could sell my car, but then I could not get to work. I could sell my laptop, but then I could not do my freelance side gigs. I took a breath. I had to do the one thing I promised myself I would never do. I had to call my parents. Grant and Paula Wood lived in a sprawling, manicured subdivision 3 hours away. Their house was a monument to beige carpets and silence. They were people who believed in appearances. They believed that if you dressed well and smiled at the neighbors, your life was successful. They had raised me with a strict code of independence, which was their code for do not bother us with your problems. But this was medical. This was life or death, or at least, life or severe damage. They always said family came first. It was embroidered on a pillow in their living room. I dialed the number. My mother answered on the second ring. "Madeline," she chirped. "We were just talking about you. Your father says you haven't liked his Facebook post about the golf tournament." "Hi, Mom," I said. "I'm sorry. I haven't been online much. I have some bad news." The line went quiet. My mother hated bad news. She treated it like a spilled drink on a white rug, something to be cleaned up immediately and never spoken of again. I explained everything. I told her about the collapse, the urgent care, doctor, Evans, the surgery, the $10,000. I kept my voice steady, trying to sound like a project manager outlining a logistical hurdle, not a terrified daughter. When I finished, there was a long pause. I heard my father's voice in the background, asking what was wrong. "Put him on speaker." "Mom," I said. I heard the rustle of the phone being moved. "Hey, kiddo," my father said. His voice was booming, confident. "Mom says you've got a stomach ache that's costing a fortune. It's a blockage." "Dad," I said, "I need surgery. Soon. The hospital needs a $10,000 deposit up front because of the insurance gap. I've tried loans. I've tried everything. I'm short $8,000. I was hoping you could loan it to me. I'll sign a promissory note. I'll pay interest. I just need to book the slot." Another silence. This one felt heavier. $10,000, my father repeated, whistling low. "That is a lot of money." "Madeline, I know." I said, "You know, this is exactly what we talked about when you took that job at the small firm." My mother chimed in. "We told you the benefits package was subpar. We told you to stay in corporate." "Mom, I can't change my job right now," I said, fighting the urge to scream. "I am in pain right now." "Well, look," my father said, "we would love to help, obviously, but our liquidity is a little tight at the moment. The market has been volatile. Everything is tied up in the retirement accounts and the property." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. They were not broke. My father drove a brand new luxury SUV. My mother had just come back from a cruise to Greece. "Dad," I said, "please, it is urgent." "Is it, though?" he asked. "I mean, doctors always try to rush you into the OR. That is how they make their boat payments. Have you tried a holistic approach? Maybe a diet change? You have always had a sensitive system. You hold on to stress. I am not holding on to stress," I said, my voice rising. "I have a physical obstruction." "Lower your voice, Madeline," my mother snapped. "There is no need to be hysterical. We are just trying to help you think this through. You need to take adult responsibility for your health. If you had an emergency fund like we always told you to build, this wouldn't be a crisis." I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out. Hot and humiliating. "I do have savings." I said, "It is not enough." "Well, bad timing," my mother said, her voice shifting into a breezy, conversational tone that was jarring. "We just sent a large wire to Chelsea yesterday." My eyes snapped open. Chelsea was my younger sister. 26, beautiful, flighty, the golden child who had never held a job for longer than 6 months. "Chelsea?" I asked. "Is she okay?" "Oh, she's wonderful," my mother gushed. "She found this darling apartment in the city. It is a little out of her budget, but we decided to help her with the first year's rent and the furniture. It is an investment in her future. She needs a stable environment to launch her styling business." I felt the blood drain from my face. They had just dropped tens of thousands of dollars on an apartment for Chelsea, who was perfectly healthy, while I was begging for surgery money. "You paid her rent?" I whispered. "It is an investment," my father repeated, his voice firm. "Chelsea is at a delicate stage. She needs support. You, Madeline, have always been the strong one. You are resilient. You will figure this out. You always do." "Dad," I said, and this time I did beg. "I am scared. I am in pain every single minute of the day." "Look, let us look at the numbers at the end of the quarter," my father said. "Maybe we can free something up then. But right now, we just cannot do it." And honestly, "Madeline, I think you are overreacting to the doctor's pitch. Get a second opinion. Sleep on it." I hung up. I did not say goodbye. I just pressed the red button and let the phone drop to the couch. I sat there for an hour as the sun went down, turning my apartment into a gray box. The pain in my abdomen pulsed, a reminder that my body did not care about my parents' liquidity or Chelsea's new styling business. I was embarrassed. That was the primary emotion. I was 33 years old, and I had just been told by my parents that my life-saving surgery was less important than my sister's aesthetic. I was furious. Yes, but the terror was the loudest thing. I had 10 days. I stood up. I wiped my face. I decided right then that I would not call them again. I would not give them the satisfaction of hearing me cry. I walked around my apartment and started grabbing things. My DSLR camera. The one I bought with my first bonus? Sell pile. The designer handbag I found at a consignment shop? Sell pile. My grandmother's vintage brooch? I hesitated. I put the brooch back in the drawer. Not yet. I went online and applied for a predatory medical loan. The interest rate was 28%. It was financial suicide. But I typed in my social security number and hit submit. Denied. My debt-to-income ratio was still the problem. I lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling fan, counting the rotations. 1, 2, 3. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I reached for it, expecting a work email. It was a picture of a cat. Then the phone rang. The caller ID said, Eleanor Wood. Grandma. I cleared my throat, sat up, and forced a smile onto my face, even though she could not see it. I answered on the third ring. "Hi, Grandma," I said, trying to inject some brightness into my tone. "Maddie." Her voice was warm, like dry paper and vanilla. "I was just looking at that photo of the neighbor's cat and thought of you. You sound tired. Just work," I said, "just the usual grind." "Are you eating?" she asked. "You sound thin." I know that sounds like a crazy old lady thing to say, hearing weight over the phone, but I can hear it. "You sound hollow." "I'm fine." "Grandma." "Really, just busy." "How are your parents?" she asked. "They're fine," I said quickly, too quickly. "I talked to them today. They're busy. Dad's golfing. Mom's redecorating, I think. And Chelsea?" "Doing great. Moving into a new place." Eleanor paused. The silence on her end wasn't heavy like my parents' silence. It was thoughtful. Alert. "Madeline," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "Is something wrong?" "No," I lied. "You know you can tell me," she said. "I know." I said, "I have to run." "Grandma, I have a deadline." I hung up before I could crack. If I told her, she would worry. She lived on a fixed income in a small retirement condo. She drove a 15-year-old Honda. She could not help me with the money, and telling her would only break her heart. I could not carry her worry on top of my own fear. The next morning, The pain was worse. It felt like a hot wire being pulled through my intestines. I took 3 ibuprofen, which the doctor had told me to avoid. But I had to get to work. I needed my birth certificate. The medical loan company, a different one, with an even higher interest rate, needed proof of citizenship and identity for the underwriting. I had lost my copy during my last move, but I knew my parents kept all our original documents in the safe in their study. I called out of work. Claiming a migraine, I drove the 3 hours to my parents' house. I did not call ahead. I knew they would be home on a Friday afternoon. I pulled into the driveway. Chelsea's car was there, a convertible my father had helped her lease. I let myself in with my key. The house smelled of lilies and lemon polish. I could hear voices coming from the sunroom at the back of the house. I walked softly down the hallway. I just wanted to get into the study, grab the document from the filing cabinet, and leave. I did not want to face them, but the study door was locked. I would have to ask them for the key. I walked toward the sunroom. The glass doors were open. I stopped just outside the frame when I heard my name. Honestly, it is just exhausting. My mother was saying, she sounded exasperated. The way one talks about a dog that won't stop barking. Madeline called yesterday in a total panic, sobbing, demanding money. Is she really sick? Chelsea's voice, she sounded bored. Who knows? My father said. I heard the clink of a glass setting down on a table. Madeline has always been dramatic. Remember when she was 12 and thought she had scarlet fever? It was a heat rash. She loves the tragedy of it all. But she wanted $10,000? Chelsea asked. That is insane. She claims she needs surgery. My mother said, but you know your sister. She probably went to some boutique clinic that upsells everything. We told her no. We have to draw a line. If we give her money every time she cries wolf, she will never learn to manage her own life. Besides, my father added, chuckling, we spent the budget on the fabulous new penthouse for the star of the family. I heard the sound of clinking glasses. Cheers to that. Chelsea laughed. I stood frozen in the hallway. My hand was resting on the wall for support, and I felt the texture of the expensive wallpaper under my palm. They did not just think I was irresponsible. They thought I was a liar. They were rewriting my reality to suit their narrative. It was easier to believe I was dramatic than to admit they were letting their daughter suffer. I could have walked in there. I could have screamed. I could have lifted my shirt and shown them the bruising that was starting to form on my side. I could have shown them the medical report that said obstruction and necrosis risk, but the shame was too heavy. It pinned me to the floor. If I walked in there, I would be the crazy daughter crashing their nice afternoon. I would be the problem. I turned around. I walked back down the hallway, my footsteps silent on the plush runner. I left the house. I got in my car. I drove away without the birth certificate. I cried for the first hour of the drive. Then, somewhere around mile marker 50, the tears stopped. A cold, hard numbness took over. It was better than the tears. It was armor. I got back to my apartment late that night. I was exhausted, my body trembling with fatigue. I checked my email. There was a message from the hospital billing department. Subject: surgical scheduling. Urgent. Dear Ms. Wood, this is a courtesy notification regarding your scheduled procedure with Dr. Evans. As of 5 p.m. today, we have not received the required preoperative deposit. Due to high demand for operating room availability, we can only hold your slot for another 48 hours. If funds are not secured by then, we will be forced to release the appointment to another patient on the wait list. The next available surgical date is in 3 months. I stared at the screen. 3 months. Doctor. Evans had said weeks. 3 months meant a rupture. 3 months meant emergency surgery in the middle of the night. 3 months meant I might lose part of my bowel. Or worse, I had 48 hours. I had sold my camera for $600. I had sold my handbag for $400. I had $1,200 in savings. I was thousands of dollars short. I looked at the phone. I looked at the contacts. Mom, Dad, Chelsea. I deleted their numbers. I sat in the dark, the blue light of the laptop illuminating my face, and I realized that being a good daughter, being a responsible adult, being quiet and polite, None of it was going to save me. I was alone. The pain in my side throbbed, sharp and rhythmic, a ticking clock that only I could hear. I opened a new tab on my browser. I typed in payday loans. I typed in sell kidney. I typed in GoFundMe. Then I closed the laptop. I curled up on the rug, pulling my knees to my chest to protect the hurting place. The phone rang again. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. Then it rang again immediately. I reached out and picked it up. "Hello?" I rasped. "Madeline." Eleanor's voice was sharp this time. Not warm, sharp. "I called your mother. She told me you were asking for money for a vacation." "What?" I breathed. "She said you called begging for money for a trip, and they had to tell you no because of adult responsibility." I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "That is what they told you?" "Madeline," Eleanor said, and I heard the steel in her voice that I had not heard since I was a child. "Tell me the truth, right now. Why did you really call them?" I took a breath. My resistance shattered. The wall came down. "I am not going on vacation. Grandma," I whispered, "I am sick. I need surgery. They want $10,000 or they won't fix me. And I don't have it." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Start from the beginning," she commanded, "and do not leave anything out." So I did. I told her about the pain, the hospital, the deposit, the rejection, the apartment, the conversation I overheard in the sunroom. When I finished, there was a long silence. I thought maybe she had hung up. I thought maybe she was ashamed of me too. Then she spoke. "Madeline, wash your face. Drink a glass of water. Grandma, do as I say. You are not losing that surgery slot. But I will handle it." She said, "Grandma, you can't afford—" "I said I will handle it," she interrupted. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. It sounded like a judge reading a verdict. "Do not call your parents. Do not answer if they call you." "What are you going to do?" I asked, a new kind of fear rising in my throat. "I am going to teach my son a lesson he should have learned 40 years ago." She said. The line went dead. I looked at the phone. I looked at the email from the hospital. The countdown was still ticking, but for the first time in 10 days, I did not feel like I was the only one hearing it. I stood up. I went to the sink. I washed my face. The pain was still there. But the panic had shifted. It had been replaced by something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope, wrapped in the cold anticipation of a storm. I waited for the fallout. I did not know what my grandmother was planning, but I knew Eleanor would. She did not yell. She did not make scenes. She made plans. And as I stood there in my dim kitchen, waiting for the next move, I realized that my parents had made a critical error. They thought they were dealing with a dramatic daughter. They forgot they were also dealing with the woman who raised them, and she was not happy. The rejection letters did not arrive in envelopes. They arrived in my inbox, dinging softly on my phone while I tried to focus on a marketing spreadsheet. "We regret to inform you, based on your current debt-to-income ratio, unable to approve the requested amount, I had applied to 3 credit unions, a personal loan startup that advertised during podcasts, and a medical credit card that bordered on usury. The result was a mathematical cage I could not break out of. I was a victim of my own responsibility, because I had dutifully consolidated my student loans and made every payment on time for a decade. My monthly obligations looked high on paper, because I had taken a slight pay cut to work at a firm with better work-life balance, a joke. In retrospect, my income looked risky. They did not care that I had never missed a bill. They only saw that if they loaned me $10,000, I would be statistically likely to drown. I sat in my cubicle, staring at the denial from the credit union. It was the one I had banked on. I had even gone in person, shaken the branch manager's hand, and explained that this was for a medical necessity. He had looked sympathetic. The algorithm that processed my application did not have eyes to look sympathetic with. It just spit out a no. I closed the browser tab. "Hey, Madeline?" I jumped. The sudden movement sent a jagged spike of pain through my abdomen that made my vision blur. I grabbed the edge of my desk to keep from doubling over. It was Dave. my supervisor. He was holding a coffee cup and leaning against the partition, looking uncomfortable. "You got a second?" he asked. "Sure," I said. My voice sounded wet, breathless. We went into the small conference room with the glass walls. I walked slowly, trying to keep my gait even, trying not to wince every time my heel struck the carpet. Dave closed the door. He did not sit down. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just a little under the weather. You have been under the weather for a while." "Maddie," he said. He looked at the floor, then back at me. "Look, I'm not supposed to say anything, but corporate is looking at the numbers for Q3. We are down a major account. There are rumors of a restructuring." My stomach dropped, which was a mistake, because it triggered another wave of nausea. "Restructuring?" I asked. "Layoffs." He translated. "They are looking at productivity metrics. You have used 6 sick days in the last month. You are missing deadlines on the slide decks. I know you are dealing with something, but I need you to be visible right now. I need you to be on it. If they see you slipping, I can't protect you." I nodded. I felt cold. "I understand." I said, "I will tighten it up." But my thumb hovered over the screen, and I tapped it. The photo was high resolution, bright, and airy. It showed a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows. There was a cream-colored sectional sofa that probably cost more than my car, a marble coffee table, a vase of fresh hydrangeas. The caption read, "Fresh starts and new spaces. So grateful for the support system that makes dreams come true." Adulting city life. Blessed. I swiped to the next photo. It was a dinner spread. Oysters. Champagne. My parents' hands were visible in the frame. I recognized my father's gold watch and my mother's manicured fingers holding a flute. They were celebrating. They were 3 hours away, toasting to Chelsea's new apartment, an investment in her future. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a dark parking garage, calculating if I could sell my plasma to pay for surgery to remove a mass from my body. The injustice of it didn't feel hot anymore. It felt cold and heavy, like wet cement settling in my chest. It wasn't just that they wouldn't help me. It was that they were actively helping her. Right now, in real time, while knowing I was desperate. They weren't conserving resources. They were allocating them. And I was not on the budget. I drove home. My apartment was a wreck. I usually kept it tidy, a habit from childhood, trying to earn approval through order, but in the last 2 weeks, chaos had taken over. There were piles of laundry on the chair because I couldn't lift the basket. There were takeout containers on the counter because I didn't have the energy to cook or do dishes. On the dining table, I had created a shrine to my failure, a stack of denial letters, a printout of the surgical estimate, a calendar with the date circled in red, now only 8 days away, a collection of pill bottles, ibuprofen, acetaminophen, anti-nausea medication, stool softeners, anything to manage the symptoms until the surgery that might not happen. I heated up a heating pad in the microwave and lay on the couch. I didn't turn on the lights. I just lay there in the gray gloom of the city evening, listening to the traffic outside, feeling the throb in my side keep time with my heartbeat. I must have dozed off, because the knock on the door made me scream. I scrambled up, wincing. Who would come here? I hadn't ordered food. "Madeline?" a voice called from the hallway. It was Eleanor. Panic spiked. I looked around the room, the pills, the mess, the denial letters. It looked like a drug den or the home of someone who had given up on life. "Just a minute," I yelled, trying to sound normal. I grabbed a blanket and threw it over the mess on the table. I kicked the laundry pile behind the chair. I smoothed my hair, which I knew was greasy. I opened the door. Eleanor stood there. She was wearing a trench coat and holding a Tupperware container. She looked small, but her eyes were sharp, scanning my face like a barcode reader. "Grandma," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "what are you doing here?" "It is late. It is 7 in the evening." "Madeline," she said, breezing past me into the apartment. "Hardly the middle of the night. I drove up because I didn't like the sound of your voice on the phone, and I made lasagna." She set the container on the counter, then turned to look at me. She didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked. She took in the dark circles under my eyes, the way I was holding my side, the pallor of my skin. Then she looked at the room. She saw the takeout boxes. She saw the blanket thrown hastily over the table. She walked over to the table and pulled the blanket off. "Grandma." "Don't," I said. But it was too late. She stared at the pile. The denial letters were right on top. Denied. Insufficient collateral. High risk. She picked one up. She adjusted her glasses and read it. Then she picked up the surgical estimate. She looked at the total. She looked at the pill bottles. She turned back to me. Her face wasn't angry. It was something worse. It was devastated. "Why are there denial letters?" "Madeline?" she asked. I sank onto the couch. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. "Because I can't pay for it," I whispered. "The insurance gap. It is $10,000 up front. I applied for loans. I tried everything. Nobody will lend it to me." She walked over and sat on the coffee table in front of me, ignoring the dust. She took my hands. Her hands were cold. Her skin papery but strong. "You told me you were handling it," she said. "I tried," I said. And the tears finally came. They weren't the polite tears I had shed in the car. They were ugly, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. "I tried, Grandma. I sold my camera. I sold my bag. I have $1,200. That is it. And the hospital says if I don't pay by Tuesday, they give the slot away." She let me cry. She didn't shush me. She just held my hands and waited until the storm passed. When I was done, she handed me a tissue from her purse. "Blow your nose," she commanded. I obeyed. "Now," she said, her voice shifting. It became crisp, businesslike. "I want to know exactly what happened with your parents. Not the polite version, the real version." I told her. I told her about the phone call. I told her about the investment in Chelsea's apartment. I told her about going to the house to get my birth certificate and overhearing them in the sunroom. "What did they say?" Eleanor asked. Her eyes were narrowed. "They said I was being dramatic." I said, my voice trembling. "Dad said I loved the tragedy of it. They joked about the money going to the star of the family. They were drinking champagne." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at the denial letter in her hand again. "And you didn't tell them it was life-threatening?" "I told them." I said, "I told them it was a blockage. Dad asked if I had tried a diet change." Eleanor stood up. She paced the small length of my living room. She reminded me of a tiger I had seen at the zoo once. Confined, but dangerous. "Okay," she said. "Okay what?" I asked. "Okay, we are done with this nonsense." She reached for her purse. "Grandma," I said, panic rising again, "please don't call them and yell at them. It will only make it worse. They will just say I am tattling. They will cut me off completely. I'm not going to yell." She said, "I am way past yelling." She pulled out a checkbook. "No," I said, realizing what she was doing. "No. Grandma, put that away. Madeline, be quiet. I can't take your money." I said, standing up despite the pain, "You are retired. You live on a fixed income. I am not going to drain your savings because my parents are jerks. I will figure something else out. I will sell my car. Sit down." Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. I sat. She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "You think I am poor?" she asked. I mean, you live in the condo. You drive the Honda." She let out a short, dry laugh. "I live in the condo because it is easy to clean. I drive the Honda because it runs. I am not destitute. Madeline, your grandfather and I were very careful. We invested well, and since he passed, I have not spent money on foolish things." She tapped the checkbook against her palm. "I have been watching," she said quietly. "I have been watching Grant and Paula for years. I saw the cars, the vacations, the way they spoil Chelsea. I assumed—" She paused, looking pained. "I assumed they were taking care of you, too. I assumed that if I stayed out of it, they would do right by both of their children." She shook her head. "I was wrong. That is my sin to carry. But I am not going to let you suffer for it." She opened the checkbook. "Grandma," I started. She held up a hand. I am going to pay for this surgery, she said. But we are going to do this my way. What is your way? I asked. First, she said, we verify. She pulled out her cell phone. She dialed a number and put it on speaker. Hello? It was my father's voice. He sounded jovial. Grant. It is Mother, Eleanor said. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was sweet, slightly wavering. It was the voice of a confused old lady. Oh, hi, Mom, he said. Everything okay? Yes, I am just fine. I was just sitting here thinking about the girls. I haven't heard from Madeline in a while. Is she doing all right? I held my breath. Oh, she is fine, Grant said. You know Madeline, always busy with work. I heard she wasn't feeling well. Eleanor pressed gently. Something about a stomach issue? My father laughed. It was a dismissive sound. She had a little scare. He said, she called us about it. We offered to help. Of course. We told her we would do whatever she needed, but you know how independent she is. She refused. Said she wanted to handle it on her own. Pride, I guess. I felt the air leave my lungs. The lie was so smooth, so easy. She refused? Eleanor asked. Point blank. Paula's voice chimed in from the background. We tried. Mom, but she is stubborn. She said she had plenty of savings and didn't want our charity. I see, Eleanor said. Her eyes were locked on mine, hard as flint. Well, that is good to know. I worry about her. Don't worry, Mom, Grant said. We are keeping an eye on her. I am sure you are, Eleanor said. Well, listen, I miss you all. I was hoping we could do a family dinner next Sunday. My treat? Maybe that Italian place you like? Oh, that sounds lovely, Paula said. We are free. Good. Tell Chelsea to come. And invite Madeline. If you talk to her, we will. Grant said. Love you, Mom, love you, Eleanor said. She hung up. The silence in the room was deafening. They lied. I whispered. They just lied. Eleanor put the phone down on the table. She looked like she had just swallowed something bitter. They did not just lie, she said. They rewrote history to make themselves look benevolent, and you look ungrateful. They are protecting their reputation. She looked at me. Madeline, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I said, I need everything in writing. She said, I need the hospital bills, the emails where you asked for loans. Did you email your parents at all? No, just the phone call. I said, what about texts? I checked my phone. I texted Mom after the call. I said, I asked if they were sure. She replied, I scrolled back. She replied, we have discussed this. Madeline, the answer is no. Please respect our boundaries. Forward it to me, Eleanor said. Screenshot it. Forward the denial letters. Forward the email from the hospital about the deposit. I want a timeline. I want dates, times, and amounts. Why? I asked. Because, she said, her eyes glittering with that cold strategy. We are going to dinner on Sunday, and I do not attend dinner parties empty-handed. The next morning, things moved fast. Too fast. I was at work, trying to hide my limp. When Sheila from the hospital called, Ms. Wood? She said. Good news. We had a cancellation for tomorrow morning. Doctor, Evans wants to slot you in. It would get this over with sooner. Tomorrow? I asked, my heart hammering. Yes, you would need to be here for pre-op at 6 a.m. But, she paused. The deposit issue. The system won't let me generate the admission paperwork without the funds clearing. I have until tomorrow? I asked. You have until noon today. She said, I need to confirm the slot by noon, or I have to give it to the next person. I looked at the clock on my computer. It was 10 a.m. I have 2 hours? Technically, yes. Can you make the payment? I need to make a call. I said. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. I called Eleanor. Grandma. I gasped when she answered. The hospital called. They can take me tomorrow, but I need the money by noon today. I am at the bank right now, Eleanor said calmly. I am getting a cashier's check. You are? Yes. I am driving to the hospital directly. I will pay it in person. Grandma. I sobbed. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. Focus on getting your work done so you can take leave. Do you have your FMLA paperwork? Yes. Submit it. Pack your bag. I will see you at your apartment tonight. She hung up. I sat there, stunned. The weight that had been crushing me for weeks suddenly lifted, leaving me lightheaded. It was going to happen. I was going to be fixed. But then, a different kind of weight settled in. The weight of what my grandmother was doing. She wasn't just paying a bill. She was stepping into a war. I left work at noon. I told Dave I was having emergency surgery and would be out for 2 weeks. He looked shocked, then guilty. Okay. He said, take the time. We will figure it out. I went home. Eleanor was there. She had a receipt in her hand. Paid in full, she said, handing it to me. I looked at the piece of paper. Amount, $10,000. Status, paid. I hugged her. I buried my face in her shoulder and cried until my shirt was wet. She held me tight, smelling of vanilla and steel. Now, she said, pulling back, you rest. You have surgery tomorrow. What about the dinner? I asked. The dinner on Sunday? I will handle the dinner. She said, you will be recovering. She walked over to her purse and pulled out her phone. I have one more call to make, she said. Who? I asked. She looked at me, and for a second, she looked terrifying. I need to call a lawyer, she said. A lawyer? Why? Because, she said, dialing a number, I suspect that your parents' sudden liquidity issues are not just about selfishness. I think they are hiding something, and if they are playing games with family money, I need to know the rules. She put the phone to her ear. Hello? Arthur? She said into the phone. Yes, it is Eleanor Wood. Yes, it has been a long time. I need a favor. I need you to pull the trust documents. Yes, the ones from 1995. I need to see the distribution clauses. She looked at me and winked, I think. She said to the lawyer that we have a breach of fiduciary duty. Part 2 ends with Eleanor telling Madeline, you won't beg, you won't fight them, I will. And she quietly makes a call that Madeline doesn't understand yet. I lay back on the couch, the receipt clutched in my hand like a shield. I didn't understand what she meant about trusts or fiduciary duties. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, someone was fighting for me, and God help anyone who stood in Eleanor Wood's way. The morning after Eleanor paid the deposit, I did not go into surgery. The slot that had opened up was for the pre-operative clearance and the anesthesia consultation. A gauntlet of blood draws and EKG machines that confirmed what we already knew. My body was failing, and the timeline was tight. The actual procedure was scheduled for the following Tuesday. 5 days away, 5 days to wait, 5 days to think. I sat in my apartment, the smell of rubbing alcohol still clinging to my skin, watching my grandmother turn my small dining table into a war room. She had not gone home. She had slept on my couch, a small, fierce lump under a quilt, and had woken up before me, brewing coffee that tasted like tar and making calls that sounded like interrogations. When I shuffled out of the bedroom, clutching a heating pad to my stomach, she was already off the phone. She had a notepad in front of her, covered in her neat, spiky handwriting. Sit down. Madeline, she said. She did not ask how I slept. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield. I sat. We need to talk about the money, she said. I know, I said, feeling the shame rise up my throat like bile. Grandma, I have a plan. I calculated it last night. If I consolidate the medical loan with my car payment and pick up freelance work on weekends once I'm recovered, I can pay you back in— Stop, she said. She put the pen down. It made a sharp click against the table. We are not talking about how you are going to pay me back, she said. We are talking about why I had to pay in the first place. I do not understand. I said, Mom and Dad said they were illiquid. They said the market was down. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. It looked old. The edges were soft and worn. Do you remember when your grandfather died? She asked. I nodded. I was 10. I remembered the smell of lilies and the way my father had cried, loud and performative, at the graveside. Robert was a careful man. Eleanor said, "We did not believe in leaving things to chance. And we certainly did not believe in leaving our grandchildren without a safety net." She opened the folder. Inside were copies of legal documents. The paper yellowed with age. When Robert died, "We established a trust," she said, "the Eleanor and Robert Wood Grandchildren's Trust. It was not a fortune, but it was substantial. We put in enough to grow over time. The mandate of the trust was specific. It was to be used for 3 things: education, health, and catastrophic emergencies." I stared at the papers. I saw my name. I saw Chelsea's name. "I never knew about this." I whispered, "You were not supposed to." Eleanor said, "It was meant to be a safety net, not a hammock. We wanted you to build your own lives, but the money was there. It was always there." She pushed a specific page toward me. "And who is the trustee?" I asked, though I think I already knew the answer. "Your father," Eleanor said. "Grant." We thought she stopped, and her voice wavered for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "We thought he would be the best guardian of your interests." She picked up her phone. "I spoke to Arthur this morning. You remember Mr. Henderson, the attorney?" I nodded. "He sent me the ledger." She said, "He has been trying to get Grant to sign off on the annual audits for 3 years, but Grant has been evasive. Arthur finally just sent me the raw data." She swiped on her phone and turned the screen toward me. It was a spreadsheet, rows and columns of numbers. "Look at the distributions." "Madeline." I looked. The text was small, but the words were clear. August 2023, beneficiary, Chelsea Wood. Purpose, housing assistance. Amount, $4,000. November 2023, beneficiary, Chelsea Wood. Purpose, career development/wardrobe. Amount, $2,500. January 2024, beneficiary, Chelsea Wood. Purpose, relocation expenses. Amount, $6,000. I scrolled down. The list for Chelsea went on and on. Rent, furniture, a business launch course. I looked for my name. I found it. Beneficiary, Madeline Wood. The column next to it was empty. 0. There was one entry from 5 years ago. Request, graduate school tuition assistance. Status, denied by trustee. I felt the room tilt. I applied for help with grad school? I asked, confused. I never applied to the trust. I asked Mom and Dad for help, and they said they couldn't. My voice trailed off. They said they couldn't afford it. I finished. Eleanor nodded. They told you they couldn't afford it. Then Grant, acting as trustee, formally denied the request on paper to keep the file looking legitimate, probably citing insufficient need or alternative funding available. She pointed to the recent entries, the ones for Chelsea, the apartment, she said. The investment they told you about? That wasn't their money. Madeline, that was the trust. That was the fund meant for your health. I felt sick, not the dull ache of the obstruction in my gut, but a sharp, acidic nausea that flooded my chest. They didn't just refuse to help me with their own money. I said, my voice shaking, they refused to give me access to the money that was specifically left for this, for health. And look at the dates, Eleanor said, her finger hovering over the screen. Last week, 2 days after you called them. Distribution, Chelsea Wood. Purpose, emergency living expenses. Amount, $3,000. Emergency? I choked out. What emergency? She needed a new sofa, Eleanor said dryly. I pushed the phone away. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the brick wall of the adjacent building. I felt like I had been punched. It was one thing to have selfish parents. It was one thing to be the scapegoat. But this was theft. This was a calculated decision to let me suffer physically while funding Chelsea's lifestyle with money that belonged to us both. They knew. I said, they knew I was in pain. They knew I was risking my credit, selling my things, and they were sitting on a pile of cash meant for exactly this scenario. And they lectured you on responsibility," Eleanor added. I turned back to her. I was crying, but I didn't feel sad. I felt a cold, white-hot rage that seemed to cauterize the fear I had been living with. "Why?" I asked. "Why would they do that?" "Because control is more addictive than money," Eleanor said. She closed the folder. "And because Grant has always been weak. He likes to be the hero for Chelsea because she applauds him. You? You are independent. You don't need him. So he resents you. And he uses the money to buy the adoration he doesn't earn." She stood up and walked over to me. She placed her hands on my shoulders. "Madeline, listen to me." I looked at her. "I paid the hospital," she said. "That money is gone. Do not speak to me of repayment plans. Do not speak to me of interest. But Grandma? No." She cut me off. "This is not charity. This is justice. That money was yours. I just advanced it." She squeezed my shoulders. "But there is a condition. I will do anything." I said, "I will sign anything. I don't want your signature." She said, "I want your voice." "My voice?" "For 30 years. You have protected them," Eleanor said. "You have smoothed over their edges. You have told people they are just quirky or old-fashioned. You have hidden their cruelty to keep the peace. You have swallowed your own pain so they wouldn't look bad." She looked deep into my eyes. "I am paying for your surgery. In exchange, you will stop protecting their image. You will stop lying for them. When people ask what happened, you will tell the truth. Can you do that?" I thought about the phone call. I thought about the champagne glasses clinking while they called me dramatic. I thought of Chelsea's Instagram post. "Yes," I said. "Good," Eleanor said, "because we have a dinner to attend." The shift in my parents happened 3 hours later. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Madeline!" she cried. Her voice was bright, sugary, completely devoid of the tension from our last call. "We just saw on the insurance portal that the pre-authorization went through. The deposit is paid." I held the phone away from my ear. Eleanor was watching me from the kitchen. Her eyebrows raised. "Yes," I said, "it is paid." "Oh, thank God," Paula gushed. "We were so worried. We knew you would figure it out. You are so resourceful. Did you get that loan? Or did you sell the car?" She was fishing. She wanted to know how I had solved the problem without them, so she could build the narrative. I didn't answer the question. "It is handled." "Mom," I said. "Well, that is just wonderful," she said. "Dad and I are so relieved. We were actually just talking about coming up to help you recover. We could drive you to the hospital." They wanted to be there. They wanted to be seen holding my hand in the recovery room, taking the selfie for Facebook, Family First Survivor. "No," I said, "I have a ride." "Oh," Paula sounded disappointed. "Well, surely we can see you before. Grandma mentioned a dinner on Sunday. She said she was treating everyone?" "Yes," I said. "Grandma is planning it. Perfect. We can celebrate. It will be a send-off for your surgery. We are so proud of you. Honey, dealing with this all on your own. It builds character." I looked at Eleanor. She nodded. "I will see you Sunday." "Mom," I said. I hung up. "They think I took out a loan." I told Eleanor. "They think they successfully forced me to stand on my own 2 feet. Let them think it," Eleanor said. "It will make the pie taste better." The rest of the week was a blur of physical misery and tactical preparation. Eleanor was in constant motion. She went to the bank. She went to the print shop. She spent hours on the phone with Mr. Henderson. She told me she had invited a few extra guests to the dinner. "Just some old friends," she said innocently. "Who?" I asked. "Arthur Henderson." She said, "The lawyer? He is also an old family friend." She reminded me. "And Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Mao. Gable was a woman from Eleanor's church who was known for 2 things, her excellent potato salad and her inability to keep a secret. If Mrs. Gable knew something, the entire Tri-County area knew it by sunset. "Why Mrs. Gable?" I asked. "She is a notary," Eleanor said, "and she loves a good gathering on Sunday afternoon." I dressed carefully. I wore a loose dress that didn't press on my stomach. I put on makeup to hide the gray circles under my eyes. But Eleanor stopped me. "Light on the concealer," she said. "Why?" "You are a woman in a medical crisis," she said. "Do not paint a mask of health over the reality. Let them see you." We drove to my parents' house in Eleanor's Honda. The drive was silent. I felt a strange vibration in my chest. Terror mixed with a dark, heavy anticipation. I was walking into the lion's den, but for the first time, I wasn't the prey. I was the bait. We pulled into the driveway. The house looked perfect. The lawn was cross-hatched with fresh mowing lines. The flower beds were riots of color. It was a stage set for the perfect American family. Grant opened the door before we could knock. He was wearing a polo shirt and holding a glass of scotch. "Mother! Madeline!" he boomed. "Welcome, welcome." He went to hug me, but I stepped back instinctively. The pain in my side was sharp today. "Careful." "Dad," I said, "I'm sore." Right. The stomach thing," he said, winking. "Well, come in. Everyone is on the patio." We walked through the house. It smelled of roasting meat and expensive candles. On the patio, my mother was arranging napkins. Chelsea was lounging on a chaise, looking radiant in a linen jumpsuit that probably cost more than my health insurance deductible. Mr. Henderson was there, wearing a suit despite the Sunday heat. He nodded at us gravely. Mrs. Gable was sitting by the punch bowl, her eyes darting around like a bird's. "Madeline!" Chelsea called out. She didn't get up. "You look tired." "I am tired." "Chelsea," I said, "I am having surgery on Tuesday." "Right, the surgery," she said. "God, that sounds intense. But hey, Mom said you got the money sorted? That is amazing. I told them you would. You are like a magician with money." She took a sip of her drink. "I wish I had your discipline," she sighed. "I am already stressing about the HOA fees at the new place." I felt Eleanor stiffen beside me. "Let's eat," Eleanor said. Her voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "I am famished." We moved to the dining room. My parents had set the table with the good china, the wedding china. It was all show. Everything was for the benefit of Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Gable. "Look at us," the plate said. "We are prosperous and generous." Grant sat at the head of the table. Paula sat at the foot. Eleanor sat on Grant's right. I was placed across from Chelsea. The conversation started with the usual fluff: the weather, the golf game, Mrs. Gable's grandchildren. Grant was in his element. He told a story about a business deal he had closed, exaggerating the numbers for Mr. Henderson's benefit. "We have had a banner year," Grant said, beaming. "Just exceptional. We are thinking of upgrading the summer cottage." "Really?" Eleanor asked. She was cutting her roast beef with surgical precision. "I thought you said the market was volatile, that liquidity was tight?" Grant didn't miss a beat. "Oh, you know how it is. Mom," he laughed. "Cash flow versus assets. We are asset rich, cash poor at the moment. That is the burden of investment. Is that so?" Eleanor said. She put her fork down. Paula sensed the shift. She jumped in. "But enough about business. Let's talk about Madeline. We are just so relieved she handled her little crisis." She turned to Mrs. Gable. "Our Madeline is so independent," Paula said. "We offered to help. Of course, we practically begged her to let us write a check. But she is so proud. She insisted on doing it herself." "I am an adult," she said. "Didn't you, honey?" She looked at me, her eyes wide and warning. She was rewriting the script in real time, in front of witnesses. I opened my mouth. The condition Eleanor had set echoed in my head. "Stop protecting their image." I didn't say that. "Mom," I said quietly. Paula's smile faltered. "What?" "I didn't say that," I repeated. Louder this time. "I asked for a loan. You told me no. You said you couldn't afford it." The table went silent. Chelsea looked up from her phone. "Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Paula laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound. "Oh, Madeline, don't be silly. You are misremembering. You were in such a state. You were hysterical." "I wasn't hysterical. I said I was desperate. Now. Grant interrupted, his voice booming. Let's not bicker. Tensions are high. Medical stuff makes everyone edgy. The important thing is, it is paid for. The system works. He raised his glass. To family resilience, he toasted. Nobody raised their glass. Eleanor reached down beside her chair. She picked up the manila folder. She placed it on the table, right next to the crystal gravy boat. The sound of the folder hitting the wood was soft, but in the silence, it sounded like a gavel. "Mom?" Grant asked, eyeing the folder. "What is that?" Eleanor didn't look at him. She looked at Chelsea, then at me, then at Mrs. Gable. "Before we eat pie," she said softly, "we are going to talk about where the money went." She opened the folder. "Grant," she said, "I asked Mr. Henderson to bring the ledger for the Grandchildren's Trust." Grant's face went from flush to pale in the span of a heartbeat. "The trust?" he stammered. "Mom, that is administrative stuff. We don't need to bore everyone with paperwork at dinner." "Oh, it is not boring," Eleanor said. "It is actually quite fascinating." She pulled out the spreadsheet. "For instance," she said, reading from the paper, "I see here that on Tuesday, the same day Madeline called you begging for surgery money, you authorized a distribution of $3,000 for emergency living expenses." She looked up at Chelsea. "Chelsea, dear, did you have an emergency last Tuesday?" Chelsea looked confused. She looked at her father. I bought the sectional." She said, "Dad said the trust covered housing setup." Eleanor nodded. "A sofa," she said. She turned to Grant. "You told your daughter who has a bowel obstruction that you were broke, and then you used the family emergency fund to buy a couch." Grant stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Now wait just a minute," he said. "You are twisting things. That trust is at my discretion. I am the trustee. I decide what constitutes a valid expense. And surgery is not a valid expense?" "Mr. Henderson asked. His voice was calm, professional, and utterly damning. Grant spun on him. "This is a private family matter. Arthur, not when you are managing a trust with fiduciary responsibilities." "Mr. Henderson said, "and certainly not when there are irregularities in the reporting." "Irregularities?" Paula squeaked. She looked like she was going to faint. Eleanor pulled out another piece of paper, the receipt from the hospital. "I paid Madeline's deposit," Eleanor said. $10,000. Grant looked at me. His eyes were wide, betrayed. "You took money from your grandmother?" he hissed. "After we told you to be responsible?" "I took money from the woman who actually cares if I live or die." I said. Eleanor held up a hand. "I paid it," she continued. "But then I looked at the trust balance. There should be over $200,000 in that account." "Grant, Robert and I put in $150,000 in 1998. With conservative growth, it should be substantial." She looked at the bottom of the spreadsheet. "Why is the balance only $40,000? The question hung in the air. Chelsea gasped. "40,000? But Dad said there was plenty. He said it was an endless resource for us." Grant was sweating now, visible beads of sweat on his forehead. "The market," he said. "The crash in 2008. We took a hit. The market has recovered." "Grant, Mr. Henderson said, "the SP is at record highs." "I managed it actively," Grant shouted. "I made trades. Some of them didn't work out. I was trying to grow the principal." "Or," Eleanor said, flipping a page, "you were using it to cover your own bad debts." She slid a bank statement across the table. "This is a transfer from the trust account to GW Holdings, LLC, she said. "That is your shell company, isn't it, Grant? The one you used for that failed restaurant venture?" Grant's mouth opened and closed. "And here," she said, sliding another paper, a transfer to American Express, a personal card, $15,000. Was that for the grandchildren's education? Or was that for the cruise to Greece? Paula let out a sob. "Grant, tell her. Tell her it's a mistake." Grant didn't say anything. He sank back into his chair. He looked small, deflated. Mrs. Gable was staring at him with her mouth slightly open. She was witnessing the dismantling of the Wood family reputation in real time. And I knew that by tomorrow morning, the prayer chain would be buzzing with the news that Grant Wood was an embezzler. "Madeline," Eleanor said. Turning to me, I looked at her. "You asked for a loan." She said, "You asked for help. You didn't know that you were actually asking for your own money. Money he stole from you." I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was looking at the tablecloth. I felt a strange sensation. The nausea was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was clarity. I looked at the folder. I looked at the pie sitting on the sideboard. A cherry pie, my favorite, which Paula had bought from a bakery and claimed she baked. "It is all a lie," I said softly. "The house, the success, the family first, it is all just a lie." Grant looked up. His eyes were wet. But there was anger there, too. "I did my best," he snapped. "I kept this family afloat. You don't know the pressure. Madeline, the mortgage, the club dues, the expectations. I borrowed from the trust to keep the lights on. I was going to pay it back." "When?" Eleanor asked. "When were you going to pay it back?" "When Madeline was dead." Grant flinched. "I didn't think it was that serious," he muttered. "She always exaggerates." I stood up. The pain in my side flared, but I ignored it. I walked over to the table and picked up the receipt Eleanor had placed there. "I am having surgery on Tuesday," I said. "They are going to cut out a piece of my intestine because I waited too long, because I was afraid of the cost." I looked at Chelsea. She was crying, her mascara running down her cheeks. She looked at me with horror. "I didn't know." "Maddie," she whispered. "I swear I didn't know. I know you didn't," I said. "But you never asked." I turned to my parents. "I am leaving." I said, "I have to prep for surgery." "Madeline, wait," Paula pleaded, reaching for my hand. "Don't," I said, pulling away. "Don't touch me." Eleanor stood up too. She gathered the papers back into the folder. "We are leaving," she announced, "but this conversation is not over." She looked at Grant. "You have until tomorrow morning to step down as trustee," she said, "or Arthur files the petition for removal and forensic accounting with the court, and then it becomes public record." She paused. "And Grant? If it goes to court, I will press charges for embezzlement." Grant turned the color of ash. "Mom, you wouldn't— I'm your son." Eleanor looked at him, and her expression was filled with a terrible, infinite sadness. "I know," she said. "That is why it has to be me." She took my arm. "Come along, Madeline." We walked out of the dining room, leaving the pie uncut and the family shattered. As we stepped out into the cool evening air, I took a deep breath. It hurt, but it felt clean. The silence in the dining room was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and vibrating with the kind of tension that usually precedes a natural disaster. The folder Eleanor had placed on the table sat there like a loaded weapon, right next to the crystal gravy boat. Grant, my father, was the first to try to dismantle the bomb. He did it the way he did everything, with a chuckle that was supposed to sound easy, but came out sounding like a choke. "Oh, honestly, Mother," he said, leaning back in his chair and swirling his wine, "you have always had a flair for the dramatic. Bringing legal paperwork to a Sunday dinner? It is a bit much, don't you think? We are trying to have a nice family meal." He looked around the table. "Seeking allies. Mr. Henderson. Surely you agree this is hardly the time for administrative reviews. Mr. Henderson did not smile. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the centerpiece. "I am here at your mother's request." "Grant," he said neutrally. Grant waved a hand. Dismissing him. "It is just money." Grant said, "It is fungible. I move things around to maximize returns. That is how wealth is built. You don't keep cash sitting in a checking account gathering dust. You leverage it." Eleanor did not look up. She opened the folder to the first page, her movements precise and calm. She did not raise her voice. She simply began to read. "The purpose of the Eleanor and Robert Wood Grandchildren's Trust," she read, her voice clear and dry, "is to provide for the health, education, and catastrophic emergency needs of the beneficiaries." It is explicitly not intended for lifestyle maintenance, luxury goods, or the personal debts of the trustee. She looked up over her reading glasses. Health, she repeated, education, emergencies. She turned the page. Distribution categories. She continued. 2023. Housing decor. Wardrobe consultation. Lease breakage fees. She looked at Chelsea. Travel, she added. A wellness retreat in Sedona. $4,000. Grant's face was turning a mottled shade of red. But before he could explode, my mother pivoted. She did it with the speed of a striking cobra. She realized Grant's business genius defense was failing, so she went for the throat. She went for me. Oh, for heaven's sake, Paula snapped, slamming her napkin onto the table. This is ridiculous. We are dissecting your father's hard work because Madeline is having a meltdown? She turned her eyes on me. They were cold. Hard beads. This is what you do. Madeline, you always overreact. You have been like this since you were a teenager. Every scraped knee was a tragedy. Every cold was pneumonia. I am not overreacting. I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I have a bowel obstruction. So you say, Paula countered. But let's look at how we got here. If you were so responsible, if you managed your money properly instead of spending it on whatever you spend it on in that city, you wouldn't be in this position. She gestured vaguely at my dress. You buy expensive coffee. You live in an apartment you don't need. You insist on working at that boutique firm instead of a real corporation. You made these choices, Madeline, and now, because you didn't save. You want to villainize your father? You want to drag us through the mud because you couldn't handle a simple bill? It was a masterclass in deflection. She was trying to make the $10,000 about my character, not their theft. Eleanor didn't argue. She simply pulled a piece of paper from the folder and slid it across the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Paula. This is the invoice for the deposit. Eleanor said, $10,000? She pulled out another paper. And this, she said, is the invoice for Chelsea's new sectional sofa. Delivered last Tuesday. Cost, $4,800. She laid them side by side, black and white, life-saving surgery versus beige upholstery. Paula stared at the papers. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The visual was too stark. It stripped away all the adjectives and excuses, leaving only the math. Chelsea reached out. Her hand was shaking. She touched the invoice for the sofa. I didn't know, she whispered. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and wet. Maddie. I swear to God, I didn't know. I asked Dad if the trust could help with the move. And he said yes. He said there was plenty of money. He said you were fine. I believe you, I said softly. But you were sick, Chelsea said, her voice rising in pitch. You were selling your stuff? Mom said you were just cleaning out your closet. I saw the realization hitting her. It wasn't just shock. It was a creeping, oily discomfort. She was realizing that her comfort had been purchased with my pain. She was the favored child. Yes, but for the first time, she was seeing the cost of that favor. I didn't want to be the one who took your money. Chelsea said, pushing her chair back. I feel sick. Sit down. Chelsea, Grant barked. Don't talk to her like that, Eleanor said. She turned back to Grant. I have already filed the request. Grant? Grant froze. What? I filed a formal petition for an accounting of the trust this morning. Eleanor said, I also notified the co-beneficiaries in writing. She gestured to the papers. That means the paper trail is no longer just in this room. It is in the legal system. It exists outside of your control. Grant looked at Mr. Henderson. Arthur? You let her do that? I advised her on her rights as the grantor. Mr. Henderson said calmly. Then, the man sitting next to Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. It was Mr. Sterling. I had barely noticed him. He was a quiet man, a friend of Eleanor's from the bank where she had kept her accounts for 40 years. He had been eating his salad in silence, observing. Grant, Mr. Sterling said, His voice was mild, conversational. Grant looked at him warily. What? If you were commingling assets. Mr. Sterling said, asking the question as if he were asking for the salt. How did you handle the tax reporting? Because if the trust paid for personal debts, like that credit card bill Eleanor mentioned, that is taxable income. Did you declare it? Grant shifted in his seat. That is a complex accounting matter. Grant said, It is actually quite simple. Mr. Sterling said, If you didn't declare it, it is tax fraud. If you did declare it, you admitted to embezzlement on your tax return. Which one is it? Grant slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. Stop it, he shouted. All of you. You are ganging up on me. He stood up, his face purple. I have carried this family for 30 years, he yelled. I paid for the weddings. I paid for the cars. I kept up appearances when the business was bleeding dry. And this is the thanks I get? My own mother bringing in lawyers and bankers to humiliate me? He was not the jovial patriarch anymore. He was the bully I remembered from my childhood. The man who would scream until the walls shook whenever he felt small. I looked at him. I saw a man terrified of being seen as a failure. And then, finally, I spoke. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, cold clarity, like the air after a thunderstorm. You didn't carry me. Dad, I said. Grant stopped panting and looked at me. I have paid my own rent since I was 22, I said. I paid my own student loans. I drive a 10-year-old car. I have never asked you for a dime until last week. I leaned forward. I asked you for a loan. I said, I told you I was in pain. I told you I was scared. I told you the surgery date would be lost. I looked at Paula. And you told me about Chelsea's apartment. You used the word investment. You told me that my health was less important than her furniture. That is not what we said, Paula cried. You are twisting words. I am quoting you. I said, you said, it is an investment in her future. You said, adult responsibility. I stood up slowly, careful of my side. I sold my camera. Mom, the one I used for my side business. I sold my winter coat. I was listing my laptop on eBay when Grandma called me. I was stripping my life down to the bone because you told me you couldn't help. I pointed at the invoice for the sofa. But you could. You just didn't want to help me. Paula's face crumpled. She looked around the table, seeing the judgment in the eyes of Mrs. Gable, Mr. Henderson, Mr. Sterling. She saw her reputation cracking like cheap porcelain. She tried tears first. She put a hand to her chest and let out a sob. I won't be treated like this, she wailed. I have been a good mother. I have sacrificed everything for you girls. Nobody moved. The tears didn't work. So she tried righteousness. She straightened up, wiping her eyes angrily. Fine, she spat. If you are going to be this ungrateful, then maybe you don't deserve our help. I won't be accused in my own home. I am done with this. She turned and marched toward the patio door. She was halfway there when Eleanor spoke. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. Then explain why you told people Madeline refused the help. Eleanor said. Paula stopped. Her back was to us. But I saw her shoulders stiffen. She turned around slowly. What? Eleanor picked up her phone. She tapped the screen a few times. I have a screenshot here, Eleanor said. From the Wood family cousins group chat. Aunt Sarah sent it to me. Eleanor held the phone up. It was a text from Paula. Sent 3 days ago. Please pray for Madeline. Eleanor read aloud. She is having some health issues. But you know how stubborn she is. We tried to give her money for the best doctors, but she refused it. She insists on doing it the hard way. It is heartbreaking to watch her push us away. The room went dead silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. You told them I refused? I whispered. Paula looked trapped. She looked like an animal caught in a headlight beam. I was protecting you, she stammered. I didn't want them to think you were broke. I was trying to make you look strong. No, I said. You were trying to make yourself look generous. I realized then that the cruelty wasn't just the refusal. It was the PR campaign. They had denied me the money to save my life. And then they had preemptively poisoned the well so that if I complained, I would look like a liar. They had engineered a scenario where their reputation remained spotless, even if I died. Grant looked at Paula. Even he seemed surprised by the depth of that particular lie. "Paula," he said. "Shut up." "Grant," she hissed. "I did it for us." She looked at me, her eyes venomous. "You want to be the victim so bad. Madeline? Fine, be the victim. But don't you dare say we didn't care. We cared enough to lie for you." The logic was so twisted it was almost impressive. Eleanor stood up. She closed the folder. "That is enough," she said. She looked at Grant. "Drop it, Mom." Grant growled. His voice was low. "Dangerous. Just drop it. We will fix the trust. We will pay Madeline back. Just stop this humiliation right now." "No," Eleanor said. She walked over to me and took my hand. She looked Grant in the eye, and she looked taller than I had ever seen her. "You don't get to refuse the $10,000 and still keep your dignity untouched," she said. She squeezed my hand. "We are leaving," she announced. This time, nobody tried to stop us. We walked out of the dining room, past the untouched pie, past the expensive furniture bought with stolen money, and out the front door. I heard Chelsea sobbing as we closed the heavy oak door behind us. The cool air hit my face, and I realized I was shaking. Not from fear anymore, from the sheer, massive weight of the truth finally being dropped. I got into Eleanor's car. She started the engine. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," I said. "Good," she said, putting the car in gear. "You shouldn't be." We drove away, leaving the wreckage of the perfect family in the rearview mirror. The Monday before my surgery felt less like a countdown to healing and more like the holding pattern before a bomb detonation. My phone, which had been blissfully silent during the weeks I was begging for help, was now vibrating across my coffee table every 15 minutes. It was a relentless assault of affection from the people who, just 72 hours prior, had been drinking wine while mocking my pain. I picked it up to check the time. I had to be at the hospital for final blood work in an hour. There was a text from my father. "Maddie, honey, I am looking at the bank accounts. I can wire Eleanor the $10,000 today. We can pay her back. Let us handle this. We are family." There was a text from my mother. "I was thinking about your recovery. Your apartment is so small and those stairs are terrible. Why don't you come home? I can set up the guest suite. I will make you soup. We can watch those old movies you like." And then, the kicker. A follow-up from my mother, sent 2 minutes later. "Also, maybe we can post a sweet photo on Facebook before you go in? Just a selfie of us FaceTiming or something? I want everyone to know we are rallying around you. People are talking, and we want to show a united front." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. A united front. They did not want to pay Eleanor back because they felt guilty. They wanted to pay her back so there would be no debt to hold over their heads. They did not want me to recover at their house because they missed me. They wanted me there so they could control the narrative, sequestering the evidence of their neglect behind their double-locked front door. And the photo. That was the smoking gun. They were terrified. The cracks in the porcelain finish of the Wood family reputation were starting to show, and they were scrambling for the spackle. I did not reply. I turned the phone off. I took a shower, washing my hair with the antimicrobial soap the hospital had given me. It smelled like industrial cleaner and fear. I dressed in loose sweatpants and a t-shirt. I drove myself to the hospital. Walking into the pre-op center felt like walking into a different world. The air was colder here. The lights were harsher. It was a world of biological realities, where charm and net worth meant nothing. I sat in a plastic chair while a nurse named Brenda checked my vitals. She frowned at the blood pressure cuff. "You are running a little high." "Sweetie," she said, "you nervous?" "I am terrified," I admitted. "It is a big surgery," she said, typing into the computer. "But doctor, Evans is the best. And you have got someone to drive you tomorrow? Someone to stay with you for the first 24 hours after discharge?" "Yes," I said. "My grandmother." "That is good," Brenda said. You cannot do this alone. You need a support system. I looked at the beige curtain separating me from the next patient. I thought about what would have happened if Eleanor hadn't called. If I hadn't answered, I would be sitting here, or maybe not here at all. I would be at work, sweating through the pain, waiting for something inside me to rupture. I would be alone. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My independence, the thing I had prided myself on, the thing my parents had weaponized against me, was a myth. Nobody is independent when their body fails. We all need someone, and the people who were supposed to be my default, my safety net, had looked at my drowning hand and high-fived each other. I finished the testing. I got the wristband. I got the instructions. Nothing to eat or drink after midnight, when I walked out to the parking lot. I saw Eleanor's Honda parked next to my car. She was sitting in the driver's seat, reading a book. She rolled down the window as I approached. "Done?" she asked. "Done." I said. "Good." She said. "Get in. Leave your car here. We are going to my place." "Why?" I asked. "Because," she said, checking her watch. "I have called a meeting." "A meeting?" I asked, feeling a spike of anxiety. "With who?" "Everyone," she said. Eleanor lived in a condo complex that was aggressively quiet. It was the kind of place where people complained if your wind chimes were too loud. But when we walked into her living room, the air was buzzing. She had set up folding chairs. There was a pot of coffee on the sideboard, but no cookies. This was not a social call. My parents were already there. They were standing near the sliding glass door, looking like trapped birds. Grant was pacing. Paula was picking invisible lint off her blouse. Chelsea was sitting on the sofa, her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked pale. And there were others. My Aunt Sarah, my father's sister, who lived 2 towns over, my cousin Mike, and, inevitably, Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, sitting in the corner with a notepad. When I walked in, Paula rushed toward me. "Madeline!" she cried, reaching out. "Oh, look at you. You look so pale. Come sit down. I brought you a pillow." I stepped around her. "I am fine." "Mom," I said. Grant moved to intercept me, his face fixed in a grimace of concern. "Maddie, listen." He lowered his voice. "We need to shut this down. Grandma is losing it. She is dragging Sarah and Mike into this. It is embarrassing. Tell her to stop. Tell her we worked it out." I looked at him. I saw the sweat on his upper lip. We didn't work it out. "Dad," I said. She paid. "You didn't." Eleanor clapped her hands. It was a sharp, dry sound that silenced the room. "Take a seat, everyone," she said. Grant remained standing. "Mother, this is absurd," he said. "This is a private matter between me, Paula, and the girls. There is no need to air our laundry in front of Sarah." Sarah, who had never particularly liked Paula, crossed her arms. Eleanor said there were irregularities with the family trust. "Grant," Sarah said, "as a secondary beneficiary in the event of your death, I have a right to know if you are mishandling the assets." "I am not mishandling anything," Grant shouted. "Sit down." "Grant," Eleanor said. Her voice was not loud, but it had the weight of absolute authority. Grant sat. Eleanor stood in the center of the room. She did not look like a sweet grandmother today. She looked like a prosecutor. "I called you here because there are rumors," Eleanor began. "Mrs. Gable is talking. The prayer chain is talking. And I do not like rumors. I prefer facts." She picked up the file folder from the side table. The same folder from Sunday dinner, now thicker. "The facts are these," she said. "Last week, Madeline required emergency surgery. The cost was $10,000. She asked her parents for a loan. They refused. They told her they were illiquid. They told her to be more responsible." She paused, letting the words sink in. "In the same week," Eleanor continued, "Grant, acting as trustee of the Wood Grandchildren's Trust, authorized a distribution of nearly $5,000 for a sofa for Chelsea." Sarah gasped. She looked at Grant. "You bought a couch, but you wouldn't pay for surgery?" Sarah asked. "It wasn't that simple," Grant protested. Madeline didn't make it clear how urgent it was. I read the text messages. Eleanor interrupted. She forwarded them to me. She was very clear. She said surgery. She said pain. She said scared. Eleanor turned to the timeline she had taped to the wall, a literal poster board she must have made at Kinko's that morning. August 12th. Madeline calls. August 12th. Grant claims poverty. August 14th. Grant transfers $3,000 to Chelsea. August 15th. Paula tells the family group chat that Madeline refused help. She pointed to the last item. That is the lie that brings us here. Eleanor said, Paula, would you like to explain why you told Sarah and the cousins that Madeline refused our money? Paula stood up. She was trembling. I was protecting the family name, she cried. It looks bad, okay? It looks bad if our daughter is broke. It looks bad if she can't manage her own life. I wanted people to respect her. No, Eleanor said calmly. You wanted people to respect you. Eleanor walked over to the coffee table and picked up a stack of documents I hadn't seen before. But that is just the social sin. Eleanor said, we also have the financial sin. She handed a document to Mr. Henderson. Arthur, would you summarize what we found in the deeper audit of the trust? Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He stood up. We found a series of withdrawals dating back 6 years. He said, they were labeled as investment transfers to an entity called GW Holdings. Grant went white. However, Mr. Henderson continued, GW Holdings is not an investment firm. It is a shell company registered to Grant Wood. The funds were used to service debt on a commercial real estate venture that went bankrupt in 2019. The room went silent. You lost money on that strip mall deal? Sarah asked. You told us you sold that for a profit. I was going to pay it back, Grant stammered. I just needed bridge capital. The market turned against me. I didn't want to worry anyone. So you raided the grandchildren's trust, Eleanor said. I was protecting the lifestyle, Grant shouted. Standing up again. Do you know what it costs to live in that house? Do you know what the club membership costs? Paula needs her vacations. Chelsea needs her help. I was trying to keep the ship afloat. He pointed at me. And Madeline. Madeline was the only one I didn't have to worry about. She was the strong one. She never asked for anything. So yes, I prioritized the fires I had to put out. I figured she could handle herself. I figured she would find a way. She always does. The admission hung in the air. He hadn't denied me because he hated me. He had denied me because I was the path of least resistance. He knew I wouldn't scream. He knew I wouldn't make a scene. He had punished me for my competence. And you? Paula? Eleanor asked. Paula was crying now, ruining her mascara. I didn't know about the shell company, she sobbed. I swear. Grant handles the finances. He just gives me the budget. But you knew about the refusal. Eleanor said, you were on the phone. Paula looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. I just wanted everything to be nice, she whispered. I wanted us to look like we made it. If people knew we were struggling, if they knew we couldn't write a check for $10,000, they would pity us. I couldn't stand that. So you preferred for Madeline to be seen as difficult, rather than for you to be seen as broke. Eleanor summarized. Paula didn't answer. She just wept into her hands. Chelsea stood up. She walked over to where I was sitting. She looked different today. The defensive edge was gone. She just looked young and scared. Maddie, she said. I looked up at her. I didn't know about the business, she said, and I didn't know about the debts, but I knew they liked me better. She wiped her nose. I knew if I asked for something, I got it. And I knew if you asked, you got a lecture. I guess I never questioned it because it benefited me. And I am sorry. She reached into her purse. I can write a check, she said. I can sell the furniture. I can give you the money back for the deposit. I looked at her hand. It was shaking. I don't want your money. Chelsea, I said softly. Please, she said. Let me help. I can come over after surgery. I can help you change bandages. I can cook. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes. She was my sister. But another part of me looked at her and saw the years of silence, the years of taking while I gave. I don't know. Chelsea, I said, I think I need some time. She nodded. Tears spilling over. She understood. Eleanor cleared her throat. We are almost done, she said. She turned to Grant. She held out a single sheet of paper. This is a resignation letter, she said. It removes you as trustee of the grandchildren's trust. It appoints an independent fiduciary, the bank, to manage the remaining assets. Grant stared at the paper. And if I don't sign? Eleanor gestured to Mr. Henderson. Then Arthur files the lawsuit tomorrow morning. We allege breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, and fraud, and I will personally call the district attorney to discuss criminal charges. Grant looked at his mother. You would put your own son in jail? Eleanor's face was like stone. I would protect my grandchildren from a thief. She said, even if I gave birth to him. Grant looked at Paula. Paula was useless to him now. She was a puddle of shame on the chair. He looked at Sarah, who was looking at him with disgusted fascination. He realized he had no moves left. The bluff was called. He took the pen. I will sign, he said, his voice raspy. But I want a stipulation. No public announcement. We keep this in the family. Eleanor shook her head. I have already sent letters to the other beneficiaries, she said. The cousins know there is an audit coming. They know why. Grant froze, the pen hovering over the paper. You already told them? I told them I was securing their inheritance. Eleanor said, I didn't give them the sordid details of your debts. Grant, I left you a shred of dignity, but I made sure you can't spin this. There is no undo button. Grant signed the paper. He pressed so hard the tip of the pen almost tore the page. He stood up. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Eleanor. Come on, Paula, he said. Paula stood up, wiping her face. She looked at me one last time. Good luck tomorrow, she whispered. Then they walked out. They looked smaller than I had ever seen them. They were not the golden couple of the subdivision anymore. They were just two people drowning in a debt of their own making, exposed to the light. The meeting broke up quickly after that. Sarah hugged me, awkwardly, promising to check in. Mr. Henderson packed his briefcase. When they were all gone, it was just me and Eleanor. The apartment was quiet again. She sat down in the chair Grant had vacated. She looked tired. For the first time. She looked her age. Are you okay? Grandma? I asked. No, she said frankly. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. He is my son. I remember teaching him to tie his shoes. She looked at the signed resignation letter. But he lost his way, she said, and he was hurting you to hide it. I couldn't allow that. She stood up and walked over to me. Go home. Madeline, pack your bag. Sleep in your own bed tonight. I will pick you up at 5 a.m. I drove home in a daze. My apartment felt different when I walked in. It didn't feel like the place where I had suffered alone. It felt like a place I was about to leave. I packed my bag, toothbrush, warm socks, a book I wouldn't read. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at my stomach. Tomorrow, they would cut me open. They would take out the bad part. I felt scared, yes, but I didn't feel heavy. The secret was out. The weight of protecting my parents, of being the good one who absorbed all the shock, was gone. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. I hesitated. I almost deleted it without listening. But curiosity is a powerful thing. I pressed play. It was Paula, Madeline. Her voice was soft, tremulous. It is Mom. I just wanted to say I love you. I know today was hard. I know you are angry, and you have a right to be. We made mistakes. The money got tight, and we got scared, and we didn't want to worry you. She sniffed. I am praying for you. Honey, I am praying for Dr. Evans. I know you are going to come through this beautifully. There was a pause, a long, hesitation-filled silence, and then, the reason for the call. Please don't tell anyone else about the shell company, okay? Aunt Sarah knows. But the neighbors, the club. Please, Madeline, we can't lose everything. Please don't tell anyone else. The message ended. I put the phone down on the counter. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. They still didn't get it, even after everything. even after the confrontation, the audit, the tears. Her final thought wasn't about my surgery. It wasn't about my pain. It was about the neighbors. It was about being seen. I realized then that Eleanor hadn't just saved me from a medical crisis. She had saved me from a future where I turned into them. She had cut the cord. I turned off the lights. I was ready for surgery. I was ready to have the rot cut out of me, in every sense of the word. The ceiling of the pre-op holding area was a grid of white tiles, counting down the seconds of my consciousness. I lay on the narrow gurney, shivering despite the heated blanket a nurse had tucked around me. The IV in my hand throbbed, a dull, metallic ache that anchored me to the reality of what was about to happen. Eleanor sat in the plastic chair beside me. She was holding my hand. Her grip was not the fragile, papery touch of an elderly woman. It was iron. It was the only thing keeping me from floating away on the tide of terror rising in my chest. "They are going to take good care of you," she said. Her voice was steady, a lighthouse in the fog. "I know," I whispered. My throat was dry from the lack of water. "Do not worry about the outside world," she said. "Do not worry about the money. Do not worry about your parents. I am the gatekeeper. Nothing gets to you unless I allow it." The anesthesiologist appeared above me, a masked figure with kind eyes. "Okay, Madeline," he said. "I am going to give you something to help you relax. It will feel like a warm glass of wine." I felt the cold rush of the medication hitting my vein. The lights overhead began to smear, turning into halos. "Grandma," I slurred. "I am here," she said. "I am right here." The last thing I felt was her thumb brushing over my knuckles. A rhythmic, grounding motion. Then the white tiles dissolved, and I fell into the dark. Waking up was not like in the movies. There was no sudden gasp, no dramatic eye-opening. It was a slow, painful crawl out of a deep pit. I was aware of thirst first, a desert in my mouth, and then the pain. It was a sharp, burning line across my abdomen, screaming for attention even through the haze of narcotics. I tried to move, and a moan escaped my lips. "Easy," a voice said. It was Eleanor. She was still there. She was reading a magazine by the light of the window. But the moment I stirred, she was at my side. "You are out," she said. "It is done. Doctor, Evans said it went perfectly. He removed the obstruction. No rupture. You are going to be fine." I closed my eyes, tears leaking out of the corners. I was alive. I was in debt to my grandmother. I was estranged from my parents, and I had a 6-inch incision in my stomach. But I was alive. The recovery was a lesson in humility. For the first 3 days, I could not sit up without assistance. I had to rely on nurses for everything. My independence, the armor I had worn for 30 years to protect myself from my parents' criticism, was stripped away. I was raw, vulnerable, and needy. But unlike with my parents, my neediness was not met with judgment. It was met with care. Eleanor slept in the uncomfortable recliner in my room every single night. When I woke up at 3 in the morning in pain, she was there to call the nurse. When I cried because I felt weak, she did not tell me to be an adult. She handed me tissues and told me that healing was a job, and I was working hard. It was during those long, quiet hours in the hospital room that the clarity came. I realized that for my entire life, I had been auditioning for my parents' love. I had thought that if I was just successful enough, responsible enough, quiet enough, they would finally see me as an investment worth making. But the surgery proved the terrifying truth. Love was not a meritocracy. You could not earn what they were incapable of giving. On the 4th day, I was discharged. Eleanor drove me to her condo. She had set up the guest room with extra pillows and a bell on the nightstand. "We are going to have a quiet week," she said. "And then, we are going to have a meeting." "A meeting?" I asked, clutching a pillow to my stomach as I shuffled into the house. "A family accounting meeting," she corrected. "I have hired a mediator." "A mediator? Grandma, is that necessary?" Eleanor helped me sit down on the bed. She looked at me with that familiar steel in her eyes. "We are not doing this over dinner again. Madeline, we are not doing this with yelling and crying and gaslighting. We are doing this with minutes. We are doing this with a record. 10 days after my surgery." The meeting happened. I was sitting in an armchair in Eleanor's living room, still wearing sweatpants, a blanket over my lap. The mediator was a woman named Ms. Alvarez, a professional with a calm demeanor and a briefcase full of forms. Grant and Paula arrived at 10 in the morning. They looked like they were attending a funeral for someone they didn't particularly like. Grant was wearing a suit, but his tie was loose. Paula was wearing oversized sunglasses, which she did not take off immediately. They looked at me. "Hi, Madeline," Paula said softly. "You look recovering." "I am." I said. Ms. Alvarez gestured to the dining table. "Please, take a seat. I am recording this session for the minutes, which all parties will sign at the conclusion." Grant sat down heavily. "Is this really necessary?" "Mother," he asked Eleanor, "a mediator? We are family. That is exactly why it is necessary." Eleanor said, "Family relies on memory, and your memory seems to be selective. The record will not be." The meeting began. It was brutal in its efficiency. Ms. Alvarez did not care about feelings. She cared about numbers. She walked through the timeline of the trust distributions, projecting the spreadsheet onto a portable screen she had set up. Item 1. Ms. Alvarez said, "Unauthorized use of trust funds for personal debt service." She displayed the transfers, the money that had gone to Grant's shell company, the money that had gone to pay off the credit cards used for the cruise. Grant tried to bluster. "It was a temporary liquidity strategy," he argued. "I was managing the family portfolio holistically. If the parents go under, the children suffer. I was protecting them." Ms. Alvarez did not blink. "The trust instrument is specific. Mr. Wood. It designates the beneficiaries as Madeline Wood and Chelsea Wood. It does not contain a clause for parental liquidity protection. By using these funds for your personal debts, you breached your fiduciary duty. This is not a strategy. It is misappropriation." Grant slumped in his chair. Put in those terms, stripped of his emotional justifications, he looked small. He wasn't a patriarch protecting his kingdom. He was a man robbing his children's piggy bank to pay for his own mistakes. Then came the part about me. Ms. Alvarez pulled up the record of my request, the date of the call, the date of the denial, and the date of the sofa purchase. "Grant," Ms. Alvarez asked, "why was the request for medical surgery denied while the request for furniture was approved?" Grant looked at me. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked ashamed. "I didn't think she was that sick." He mumbled. Ms. Alvarez made a note. "So, the trustee failed to verify the medical necessity of a beneficiary's request while approving a non-essential luxury purchase for another beneficiary. Is that correct?" Grant didn't answer. "Is that correct?" Ms. Alvarez repeated. "Yes," Grant whispered. Then it was Paula's turn. Ms. Alvarez didn't look at financial records for Paula. She looked at communication logs. Eleanor had provided the screenshots from the family group chat. Mrs. Wood, Ms. Alvarez said, "On August 15th, you stated to extended family members that Madeline Wood had refused financial assistance." Paula shifted in her seat. I was paraphrasing. She said, Ms. Alvarez looked at me. "Ms. Wood, did you refuse assistance?" "No." I said clearly, "I asked for a loan. I was denied. I was told to be responsible." Ms. Alvarez turned back to Paula. So the statement was false. Paula took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Everyone was asking," she cried. Aunt Sarah was asking why Madeline wasn't answering her phone. I had to say something. I couldn't tell them we said no. They would think we were monsters. "So you decided to make Madeline look like the difficult one to preserve your own social standing." Ms. Alvarez summarized. "It wasn't like that," Paula insisted. "I love her. I was trying to smooth it over. But the truth was out." The minutes were being typed. Mrs. Wood admitted to falsifying the narrative regarding the beneficiary's request for aid. It was a strange feeling, watching my parents unravel. I expected to feel triumphant. I expected to feel a surge of vindication, but I just felt tired. I looked at them. Grant, deflated and exposed as a bad businessman. Paula, frantic and exposed as a manipulator. And I realized I didn't hate them. I just didn't need them anymore. I stopped trying to catch Paula's eye to reassure her that I was okay. I stopped trying to nod at Grant to make him feel heard. I sat back in my chair, feeling the stitch in my side, and I let them sit in their own mess. I was done managing their emotions. When the meeting ended, Eleanor presented the final document. "This is the new trust agreement," she said. "The bank is now the sole trustee. You, Grant, are removed permanently. There will be an audit every year." Grant signed it without a word. As they were leaving, Paula tried to hug me again. "Madeline, please," she whispered. Can we come over next week? Just for coffee?" I looked at her. "No, Mom," I said. "I am not ready for that." "But we are your parents," she wailed. "I know," I said. "That is the problem." They left. The door closed. Ms. Alvarez packed up her briefcase. "Thank you." "Ms. Alvarez," Eleanor said. "You are welcome." "Ms. Wood, the minutes will be notarized and sent to all parties by Monday." That evening, Chelsea came over. She didn't come with excuses. She came with a casserole and a look of profound discomfort. She sat on the edge of the bed while I ate. "It is weird," she said after a while. "What is?" I asked. "Knowing," she said. "Knowing that the reason I have a nice apartment is because Dad stole from the trust. Knowing that the reason you have medical debt is because they wanted to buy a couch." She looked at her hands. "I feel guilty. Maddie, I feel like I should have known." "You couldn't have known." I said, "Dad is good at hiding things, but I knew they favored me," she said quietly. "I knew it, and I liked it. It felt good to be the one who got things easy. I never stopped to ask why it was hard for you." She looked up at me. "I want to pay you back," she said. "I calculated the cost of the furniture and the rent they paid. I can take out a loan. I can give it to the trust, or to you." I put the fork down. "I appreciate that. Chelsea," I said, "and maybe, down the road, we can talk about the trust. But right now, I don't want your money." "What do you want?" she asked. "I want a sister," I said, "not a co-conspirator. I want you to stop pretending everything is perfect when you talk to them. I want you to live in the real world with me." Chelsea nodded. Tears spilled over her cheeks. "I can do that," she said. It was a start. It wasn't a magical fix. Trust is a delicate thing, once broken, but it was a start. 2 weeks later, Eleanor called Grant and Paula again. Not for a meeting, but for a notification. She sat them down in her kitchen. I was there, sitting at the table, reading a book. I was walking better now. The pain was a dull ache, manageable with Tylenol. "I have updated my will," Eleanor told them. Grant looked up sharply. "Mom, you didn't cut us out, did you?" "No," Eleanor said. "I am not vindictive, but I am prudent." She slid a copy of the document across the table. "The bulk of the estate still goes to the family," she said, "but it goes into the trust managed by the bank. You, Grant, and you, Paula, will receive a stipend, a generous one, but you will never, ever have control over the principal again." Grant looked at the paper. "So I am on an allowance?" he asked, his voice bitter. "Like a child? Like a beneficiary who has proven he cannot handle the responsibility of stewardship?" Eleanor said. She looked at Paula. "And the beneficiary designations for my personal accounts have changed. Madeline is now the executor of my medical directives and my personal estate." Paula gasped. "Madeline? But she is the child. She is the only one who has shown the ability to make hard decisions when things are difficult." Eleanor said, "She is the only one who faced reality while you were playing make-believe." Paula looked at me with a mixture of jealousy and fear. She realized that the power dynamic had shifted permanently. The torch had not been passed. It had been seized. The final act of this tragedy played out in the most mundane of settings, the annual summer solstice fundraiser at the community center. My parents were pillars of this community. They had their names on a plaque in the hallway. They loved this event because it was a place where they could shine, where they could wear their best clothes and be told how wonderful they were. I didn't want to go, but Eleanor insisted. "You need to be seen," she said. "You need to show them you are standing." So I went. I wore a dress that hid my scar. I stood by the punch bowl, sipping sparkling water. Grant and Paula were working the room. They were smiling, shaking hands, laughing. They were trying so hard to project the image of the happy, successful Wood family. I saw them corner the pastor. I saw them laughing with the mayor. Then, the event organizer, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, took the microphone. "We want to thank our major donors," she chirped, "and we want to give a special shout-out to the Wood family." Grant and Paula beamed. They stepped forward, ready to wave, ready to accept the applause. But Eleanor stepped forward too. She took the microphone from Mrs. Higgins. It was a smooth move, practiced and polite, but firm. "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins," Eleanor said. Her voice amplified over the speakers, crisp and clear. Grant and Paula froze. Their smiles became fixed, rictus masks of terror. "My family is happy to support this community," Eleanor said. She looked out at the crowd. "We believe in showing up." She turned and looked directly at Grant and Paula. "We believe that true generosity isn't about writing a check when it is easy," she said. "It is about showing up when it is hard. It is about sacrificing for the people you love, even when it affects your bottom line." She paused. The room went quiet. Everyone sensed the subtext, the heavy, unspoken weight of her gaze. So on behalf of the Wood family, Eleanor continued, "I want to thank the people in this room who actually showed up when health mattered, the friends who brought casseroles, the neighbors who checked in." She didn't mention Grant and Paula. She didn't invite them to bow. She effectively erased them from the definition of those who showed up. She handed the microphone back. "Thank you," she said. She walked off the stage. Grant and Paula stood there. They couldn't leave. That would look like a scene. They couldn't argue. That would look crazy. So they had to stand there, in the spotlight, knowing that everyone in the room who knew the rumors, everyone who had whispered with Mrs. Gable, knew exactly what Eleanor meant. They were the parents who hadn't shown up, and Eleanor had just refused to let them hide behind her skirt. Their shame was visible. It was in the way Grant adjusted his tie, his hands shaking. It was in the way Paula's smile twitched and faded. They were in public, surrounded by people who they wanted to impress, and they had never looked more alone. That night, as I was getting ready for bed in my own apartment, I had moved back that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Grant. I sat on the edge of my bed and read it. "Madeline, I hope you are happy. You and your grandmother have effectively humiliated us. I admitted I made mistakes. I signed the papers. But did you have to let her do that today? We are still your parents. We gave you life. Eleanor has turned this family into paperwork and legal threats. I hope the money was worth it." I stared at the message. Half apology, half accusation. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about the money. He thought I was angry because I wanted cash. He didn't understand that the paperwork was the only thing that had forced him to be honest for the first time in a decade. He didn't understand that Eleanor hadn't destroyed the family. She had fumigated it. I typed out a response. "I didn't do this for the money. Dad, I did it because I didn't want to die." My thumb hovered over the send button. I looked at the words. They were true. But did he deserve them? Did he deserve my explanation? If I sent it, I was engaging, I was explaining, I was auditioning for his understanding. I deleted the text. I turned off the phone. I walked into my small, quiet living room. I looked at the spot where the denial letters used to be piled up. The table was clear. I had a scar on my stomach that would fade to a thin white line. I had a grandmother who was a warrior. I had a sister who was waking up. and I had a life that finally, truly, belonged to me. I went to the window and watched the city lights blink on, one by one, in the darkness. I didn't reply to my father. I just lived. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey through the complexities of family, money, and the hard road to self-respect. And I hope Madeline's victory resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories so you don't miss the next one. And share your thoughts in English in the comments. Would you have forgiven the parents? Or did Eleanor do the right thing? Let's talk about it.